Buckle up, buttercups. We have a lot of books to talk about this month. Grab a cup of tea, get cozy, let's get started. I'm Valerie Geary. I'm a writer, I'm a reader. I read a lot of books, too many books probably. This is where I come to talk about them with whoever is willing to listen. So thanks for joining me today. May was a bit of a mixed reading bag for me. My chosen theme for the month was to read books on my TBR shelves that had the lowest ratings on Goodreads. But I also read a lot of library books this month, so some romance, some mysteries, a little bit of nonfiction. I didn't find any absolute favorites this month, and there was one book that I even ended up DNFing or abandoning, not finishing. But there were still a lot of books that I really enjoyed, so let's get to it. Let's talk about the book that I did not finish first. Our Hearts Will Burn Us Down by Anne Valente gets about 3.8 average rating on Goodreads. Of the books that I own and have not yet read, this one is the lowest rated on my shelf. I do love this cover, and that literary title, Our Hearts Will Burn Us Down, has my literary heart pumping, but unfortunately, I could not get into this book. This was actually my second time picking this book up and trying to get through it, and my second time putting it down. And I don't think the third time is going to be the charm. I think this book is just a book that is not meant for me. I think I'm going to go ahead and unhaul it at some point and get it off my shelves. I do not think I will be revisiting it. It was one of those books that I just kind of dreaded picking up at the end of the day when it was time to sit down and do some reading. I wasn't getting excited about it. I wasn't wanting to know what happened to the characters. There are a couple reasons for this, and I think one of them was just really bad timing. This book is about a school shooting, and if you live anywhere in the United States, you know that this week, this past month, this whole year, years and years, we have been dealing with mass shootings at schools. We've been fighting with our politicians to try and get gun reform passed. And I think that for me, this book just was not one that I wanted to read about when there were so many real lives being affected, so many real families grieving. Sometimes I think that it can help to read a novel about situations that we are experiencing, but this was just bad timing for me. And so I kind of dreaded picking it up at the end of the day. I kind of wanted to do literally anything else, read another book, do chores. I just was not looking forward to this one. And that's kind of when I know that a book is not for me, that I need to put it down and move on to something else. I read about 56 pages in this book before I decided, no more, I'm moving on. I think I probably would have DNF'd it sooner, except I do like to give a book 50 pages at least to see how I'm feeling, because sometimes I just need a little bit of time to get settled into the way the story is being told. But with this one, even after 50 pages, I just wasn't invested. Like I said, this is a book that starts out with a school shooting. It takes place at a high school. It centers around 4 students who survive this tragedy, and they're all part of the school yearbook. And I think kind of the idea is that they are trying to piece together a yearbook after this great tragedy and trying to figure out how to tell the story of this shooting and of the losses and of the grief. How do you capture memories? So I think there was interesting potential here, but for me, I think the way it was written, I struggled to connect with the characters because the author was using first person plural, which is not something you see very often and is hard to pull off. And I think it was a miss in this book. We are introduced to these 4 characters in like the we setting, like the royal we. And then slowly we get to see them as individuals too. But it did serve to put some distance between the reader and the story and the characters. Another thing, I think that this was probably a little bit too literary, a little bit too MFA style of writing for me at this point in my reading journey. I think I am looking for a little more escapist fiction at this point in my life. And there were some narrative devices used in here that just kind of dragged me out of the story and dragged me away from the characters. It felt a bit heavy-handed, a bit overwritten, and there were these little asides, like lists that described certain things, but it didn't really connect the story together. It just kind of left the story feeling disjointed to me. Even if I was on board with the premise of the story, which I really wasn't, I don't know that the writing would have been enough to sustain me throughout the entirety of this book. I don't know if I would have been able to get into the nitty-gritty with the characters the way that I like to. There were a lot of things in this book that just disconnected me from it rather than drawing me in. And so, after 56 pages, DNF. I don't give stars to books that I don't finish, so This was a no-star read because I didn't finish it. Continuing on with books that I read off of my own shelf that are the lowest rated on Goodreads, I read 3 books for a May reading vlog: The Turnout by Megan Abbott, The Cassandra by Sharma Shields, and The Blackbird Season by Kate Moretti. You can hear me talk all about those books at great length in that vlog if you want to know all of my deepest, darkest feelings about those books. Check that vlog out. I also talked about some of the reasons that other people gave these books low ratings. For this video, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of each of them. The Turnout by Megan Abbott is a story about 2 sisters who are running a ballet studio together, and they are trying to cast for the Nutcracker Suite. They have a very tangled history with a lot of betrayal and emotional angst and a bunch of twisty-turny dark things. An accident takes place at the studio and almost burns the whole place down, and then a contractor comes in, and this stranger shakes everything up for these sisters, and nothing is the same after that. The Turnout got about 3.14 stars on Goodreads, but for me, it was closer to a 3.5, 4-star read. I liked this one, but there were definitely some cringy, dramatic moments that left me feeling kind of icky, and sometimes it felt a little bit over the top. But if you like Megan Abbott's books, if you have ever read anything by her, and I am a Megan Abbott fan, and so for me, this was one of her more dark, cringy, twisted ones, and I enjoyed it. Now, The Cassandra by Sharma Shields is a mythical retelling about a woman who foresees the future. She is a prophet, but no one believes her. No one believes her prophecies. No one believes what she's telling them about what's coming in the future. It is recast during World War II in Eastern Washington at the Hanford Research Facility, where they are experimenting and developing the atom bomb. We're following our main character Mildred, who is leaving home for the first time, leaving her family behind, and taking a job as a secretary at the research facility. Mildred has the ability to foresee the future. She doesn't always understand what is being told of her and what the prophets kind of want her to do. She is pushed away from her friends and family because of her gifts. Now, The Cassandra got about an average of 3.34 stars on Goodreads, and I kind of agree with that. I think for me, this was a 2.5, 3-star read. While I enjoyed Sharma Shields' narrative style and her telling of this story, I really found this to be a very despairing, devastating, depressing read with very little moments of hope. And so for me, this was just kind of a so-so read this month. The final book of that vlog was The Blackbird Season by Kate Moretti. This is a domestic suspense novel set in a small town, and it centers around a teacher and a soccer coach, a very beloved teacher and soccer coach who is found in a compromising situation with one of his students, and his entire life and reputation is called into question. He finds himself and his career and his marriage on the rocks with people challenging him and questioning him, and he is kind of trying to prove that, hey, he didn't do this thing that everyone is saying he's doing. You have multiple narrators, multiple timelines, and I just found this to be a very riveting, character-driven, slow burn suspense novel. The Blackbird Season got about 3.43 stars as an average on Goodreads, but for me, this was like a 4.5-star read. I really liked it. I read one more book on the theme of the lowest rated books on my TBR shelf. Let me tell you about Ways to Disappear by Idra Nove. On Goodreads, this gets about a 3.46, but for me, this was closer to a 4.5-star read. But I definitely can see how there would be some readers out there who wouldn't connect with this book. It is a surreal, dreamy, experimental type of book, written in almost like a vignette style. But I loved this one. I love the prose. I love the setup. The book starts with an unnamed woman who climbs a tree in Brazil, and she drags a suitcase up there, and she sits up there smoking and reading a book. There's some gentlemen playing some chess or something in the park, and they're like, hey, do you need any help? And she says, no, I've been waiting to do this for a really long time. Cut to a new chapter. We are in the United States with a woman who works as a professor and a translator. She is worried about her author because her author is missing. We come to find out that the woman who went up into the tree is this Brazilian author who has gone missing, and we are following this American translator who has translated all of this author's books into English. She is kind of obsessed with this author's writing and with the way that this author makes her feel and with getting the stories out to the world, and she becomes concerned because the author has disappeared. So she leaves the United States, leaves her fiance or her boyfriend, and goes down to Brazil to try and help find this missing author. Her boyfriend tells her it's a bad idea, it's none of her business, but clearly the translator, whose name is Emma, is very unhappy with her life and kind of is seeking more adventure and more life. There's love, there's danger, there's betrayal. It was a very strange book, but like lyrical and poetic and haunting in all the right ways. Brace yourself though, because this author did not use quotation marks for dialogue, which is like a pet peeve of mine, and I probably would have given this 5 stars if not for that one small thing. Okay, let's move on to the library books I read this month. So after reading a lot of like kind of dark, depressing, really heavy emotional books, I needed to lighten up with some heartwarming, fluffy romances. The Hookup Dilemma by Constance Gillam starts with a man and a woman meeting at a bar and deciding to get a hotel room together for the night. Just a one-night stand, you know, typical thing that you do when you go to bars. So it's supposed to be one night only, but of course fate has other plans. Rashida is our main female lead, and she is working to save her grandmother's neighborhood. There is a big developer who is trying to buy one of the properties near her grandmother's house, and Rashida is worried that this is going to obviously like destroy the neighborhood, drive up the housing prices, and her grandmother and all the other people who have lived there their entire lives are going to be forced out. She takes on this project. She goes to a community meeting where they are going to be talking with the developer and the town council to try and come to some kind of agreement about this property. And who happens to be there but the man that she slept with at the bar? And of course, he is the son of the developer who wants to buy up this property. They are both very surprised to see each other there. And of course, there is this tension now between them because he wants to buy this property and develop it and gentrify the neighborhood, and she is absolutely against that and is like, hey, you're gonna ruin everything. You're gonna ruin my grandmother's life. But of course they have like sexual chemistry and they can't stay away from each other even though they probably should. They're on opposite sides of the argument here, and as I was reading the book, it's kind of like, how are they gonna work this out? How are they gonna solve the solution so they can be together in the end? I found this romance to be pretty good. It was warm and fluffy. I did find the chemistry between the male and female leads a little bit unbelievable. I wasn't fully invested in their love story, and I did feel like sometimes the focus was a lot on the development project and not so much on the conflict in their love story. That said, I did like the characters individually, and I enjoyed Rashida's family and the hijinks that her grandmother and all the people in the neighborhood get up to as they try and stop this developer from taking over. This features an interracial couple and has a lot of warm, fuzzy moments, and it was just like the perfect escape that I needed from the real world. A Lot Like Adios by Alexis Daria features a diverse couple as well. A Latinx couple this time, and I think this is kind of like a second chance romance. You have 2 friends, Michelle and Gabe, who grew up together. They were best friends growing up. They wrote a lot of fan fiction together. They shared a very special moment their senior year of high school, and then Gabe just like disappears from Michelle's life. They were living in the Bronx as children, and Gabe leaves the Bronx. He leaves his family. He has this falling out with his family and just takes off to California and never talks to Michelle or his family again. Even though Michelle like has tried to reach out to him, Gabe just like shuts it down. Cut to like 20 years in the future. Gabe is the owner of a gym, and they are branching out. They are going to be opening up a new location in New York City, and he needs to go out there to like scope out the project and talk to his investor. It was kind of funny how like they got back together at the beginning of the book. Gabe's business partner kind of does a little finagling behind the scenes and finds Michelle, who is this marketing genius, and hires her as a freelancer. And then Michelle like tells Gabe that she'll do the job, but only if he stays with her. And so Gabe's like, okay, thinking that they're going to be in a hotel, and then Michelle drags him to her house, which is right next door to his parents' house, which puts him in a bit of a dilemma. So there was a little bit of quirkiness with their meet cute and with how like he's sneaking around trying not to let his parents know he's there because he doesn't want to deal with this stuff that he had in his past with his dad. This is a very steamy book right from the start. There's a lot of sexual tension and a lot of chemistry between these two, but there wasn't the conflict that I really like to have in a romance. There wasn't a lot of angst because they're basically together from the beginning, and you kind of know they're going to be together throughout the whole book, and there wasn't a lot of back and forth tension between will they, won't they. It was more like, well, why don't you just say what you're thinking and just get on with it already? The conflict, the arguments they had, they felt a little contrived. There was also a lot of discussion about like marketing behind the scenes, how to run a business, and I was just kind of like, get on with it, let's move on. There were some parts that I skimmed, but it was a pretty fun romp. I had a lot of warm, fuzzy moments. I really enjoyed the characters, but it's not a must read. I read one nonfiction book this month, well, listened to it, which counts as reading. Ryan and I listened to this one together over breakfast and when we went on trips together. So we listened to 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. The concept of this book is that the average human lifespan is very short. It's 4,000 weeks. And there is not enough time for all of us to do all of the things that we want to do, and we should really kind of stop trying. That sounds a little more depressing than the book actually is. Although there were parts of the book that I found to be kind of depressing, because the idea is kind of like facing down your own mortality, staring into the abyss, and seeing that, hey, you don't have time to do everything, to be everything to everyone, and so you should pick and choose carefully the things that are important to you, the people that are important to you, the projects that are important to you, and all of the rest can kind of take a back seat. I think it's kind of like an anti-productivity book. At the beginning of the book, Oliver Burkeman confesses that he is like obsessed with productivity hacks and with trying to manage his time. And it got a little toxic for him. He found himself being more and more anxious, more and more stressed. And I think that there are a lot of people out there, myself included, who try to use productivity and time management as a way to ignore our impending mortality, a way of like tricking ourselves into believing that if we can manage our time well, then we don't have to die. Yeah, this book was a little bit heavy, and it was very heavy on the philosophy and not really on the practical tips, which is fine. Some of the concepts I'm already very familiar with because I have anxiety, I've lived with it for a long time, and some of the tool sets that I have gained over my lifetime for how to deal with my anxiety were similar to the things that he was talking about in here, like having a present mindset, trying not to overthink the future or dwell too long in the past, trying to just kind of capture those small, beautiful moments that we have, because like right now is the only moment that we really are sure about. This one right here. So while I appreciated a lot of the concepts that Oliver Burkeman was exploring in this book, I didn't find it as inspirational or as helpful as I wanted it to be. I mean, I guess, yes, it like opened up a lot of conversation between me and Ryan, which was nice. And I think it gave me a lot to think about. But it also, like I said, was kind of depressing because for me, part of me feels like it can be okay to trick yourself into believing that you're going to be here longer than you might be here. You know, I mean, I don't know that it's very healthy to just be thinking about your death all the time. I guess that's kind of the point, is that we need to stop being afraid of our own death, but also as someone with anxiety and anxiety about mortality, that's a lot. And so if making to-do lists and time blocking and bullet journaling helps me feel less anxious and I can enjoy my life more, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Finally, we get to the mysteries because you know I can't go a month without reading a mystery. I read one during my May reading vlog, but I also got through a couple more. The first being Broken Places by Tracy Clark. This is a book about Cass Rains, who is an ex-cop. She left the force after she was injured on the job and has started her own business as a private investigator. She's dealing with a lot of trauma from her injury, from being injured on the job, and from the events surrounding what happened there. And then a neighborhood priest is murdered in the church, and this priest is like a father to Cass Rains. He's like a father to the neighborhood, but Cass was especially close with him. And so she finds herself brokenhearted and then trying to figure out what happened because the police just aren't super interested in investigating this case. They kind of want to brush it off as like a break-in suicide thing, but Cass knows that the priest would never do something like that. She knows there's something else going on, and so she digs in and tries to find out the truth and tries to find out what happened. Cass Rains was a pretty interesting character. She's very vulnerable, very broken. She still has connections with the police force, which made this book kind of interesting because she was kind of breaking rules, but also able to get a lot of like investigation done that maybe another type of private investigator wouldn't be able to do without the help of the police. I didn't love it, but I do like Cass Rains as a character. The characters were interesting, but the plot was just kind of slow in places, a little bit over descriptive at times. But yeah, I mean, I like the character, so I think I do want to revisit this series at some point. Finally, we come to the last book, The Last House Guest by Megan Miranda. This one is set in a small coastal summer town, an idyllic town that feels a little bit like it's two separate towns, where you have the rich people who come in during the summer and stay in their fancy houses, and then you have the people, the community, who live there all year round, and they, do the house cleaning and run the businesses and are not rich. So you have this tension between the haves and have-nots. And when we first meet our main character, Avery, we discover that she is a year-round resident in Littleport, and that she is the property manager for the Lohman properties. And the Lohmans are like the richest family who own houses in this town. Avery has become friends with Sadie Lohman, the daughter of the rich property magnate. And this kind of opens up Avery's world a little bit. She is able to kind of participate in the richer side of this town. She goes to the parties where the rich people go. She is kind of swept up in this family a little bit. But during one of the end of season parties, Sadie Lohman is found dead, and everything kind of changes for Avery. Sadie's family starts to blame Avery. People are spreading rumors and gossip. Avery has a little bit of a violent history, and so this book is told solely from Avery's perspective. There's a little bit of like a hint of unreliable narrator. Should we believe her? Should we not? The book takes place about a year after Sadie's death. Sadie's death is ruled a suicide, but a year later, when the family comes back and the town begins to prepare a memorial for Sadie, Avery begins to wonder if maybe the police were wrong, if maybe something happened to Sadie that was a little bit more nefarious. Something doesn't feel right, and Avery begins to find clues that set her on this path to investigate the truth about what happened to her friend Sadie. And this is just kind of a very entertaining, edge of your seat kind of thriller. I was completely gripped by this. I enjoyed following Avery as she was kind of going back and forth between the haves and have-nots in this town. She doesn't really fit in on either side. People don't really trust her. She's hard to trust. I really enjoyed the summer vibes of this, the twists and turns, the way that all of the secrets unfolded so slowly that I couldn't stop reading. Because just when I thought I had it figured out, Avery would reveal a little tidbit. She would drop a little new something. A new secret would be revealed, and I would just have to keep reading. This is my second Megan Miranda book, and actually I really liked this one better than the first one that I read of hers. I think the only other book I've read by her was All the Missing Girls, and I didn't really like that one, but this one I really enjoyed. Now I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I should read a little bit more of Megan Miranda's backlist. So if you're familiar with Megan Miranda, let me know which books you loved by her and which ones I should check out. Whew! I told you it was going to be a long one. It was going to be a lot of books. I honestly don't know how I read so many books this month. Since starting my day job back in March, I've been reading quite a bit less, which makes sense. But I think maybe because this month I actually ended up reading a lot of audiobooks or listening to a lot of audiobooks, and that helped because I was able to listen while I was doing chores or listen while I was walking the dog. I was switching back and forth between audio and physical books quite often, and it actually helped me get through a lot of books faster. What did you read this month? Tell me what was terrible. Tell me what was good. Tell me what was great. Thank you for watching. I'll be back soon with more book recommendations. Until then, stay cozy, and I'll see you next time.